Reverend Gilbert, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God in this matter?
I will.
Thank you.
Before I make my statement, Mr. Chairman and the council members, I just want to create the opportunity to say that the medication that I am using for post-traumatic stress disorder is doing a lot to my memory, and it might occur that I'd have to look too often in my written statement to aid me. And I hope that you will appreciate the situation. Thank you.
You'll be accommodated in every respect, sir. We appreciate your coming, and we'll take our time. Thank you.
Mr. Gilbert, could you please be seated?
Yes.
Be seated. Are you comfortable, Reverend Gilbert?
Yes,
Are
I
you?
am.
Okay, we can proceed. Could you please state your name for the record?
My name is Reuben Gilbert.
Are you currently employed?
I'm retired, but I'm with the Guyana Council of Churches as a supervisor there.
Now, Mr. Gilbert, did you on the 26th of March 2014 submit a statement to the Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry?
Yes, I did.
And did you sign this statement?
Yes, I did.
If you were to see this statement you submitted to the Walter Rodney Commission, how would you be able to identify it, sir?
I'll be able to identify it by my signature.
At this time, I respectfully seek leave of the Commission through Mr. Chairman to have the statement of Reverend Reuben Gilbert shown to him.
There's leave granted. Please proceed.
Reverend Gilbert, could you have a look at the document? Do you see your signature on the document?
Yes, I did.
Is that the statement you submitted to the Walter Rodney Commission?
Yes, it is.
Grateful. At this time, I would seek leave of the Commission through Mr. Chairman to have the said statement tendered and marked as an exhibit within these proceedings. Suggested marking RG1.
Receive and so mark. Thank you.
Grateful, Mr. Chairman. Just a matter of formality, could the statement be shown to councils present at the bar table?
And Mr. Gilbert, you are free to consult your statement at any time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Here's a copy, let's get it. Now, Father Gilbert, could you please indicate to the court, the commission, sorry, what year you were born?
I was born on the 29th of October, 1936.
1936. And could you state what were the names of your parents?
My father was Edward Gilbert, and my mother is Millicent Gilbert. They are both deceased.
Could you indicate?
Counsel, on these non-controversial matters, like when you were born and so on, when any event is here, say, your parents had to tell you that you couldn't have known. So lead the witness on all those matters.
I have no difficulties.
Yes,
Sir.
yes.
Mr. Gilbert, you went to primary school in Guyana, correct?
Yes, I did.
Did you remain in Guyana, sir?
No, I spent 7 years in the United States and 11 years in the Caribbean.
Around what year did you return to Guyana?
From the United States, I returned on the last day of December, 1969.
Now, when you returned to Guyana on the last day of December 1969, were you qualified at that time?
Yes, I held a BS in education.
When you returned to Guyana, did you seek employment at that time?
Yes,
And where did you seek employment?
I sought employment few places, but the place that employed me right away was the Ministry of Economic Development. And within a month, maybe like 2 weeks after I started to work there, I received a letter which dismissed me before the month was completed.
Before the month was completed?
Yes, I received a dismissal letter.
And do you know who that letter came from?
That letter, eventually I got the information that it came from the office of the president, Mr. Barnum.
Who indicated to you that the letter came from the office of the president?
Well, let us take first employment, and then I'll get to that. The place that employed me first was Guyana, and I did the interview. Mr. Guyana, Mr. Harold Davis. Mr. Harold Davis, he employed me, and he spoke about where I'm going to be working at the Wales Estate, and he would send me some information when I could start to work. But as I was walking away from his office, he called me back. He said, "Come a minute." He said, "Why is it you have been here so long?" Because from the time I got that job at Harold Davis, there was a lot of time where I tried to get employment and I was unsuccessful. So he called me back. He said, "Why is it you are here in the country so long unemployed?" And I told him what was true is that the information concerning my qualification that I submitted to the Ministry of Education, I was not hearing from the ministry at all. So he said, "Wait a minute," and he got on the phone and he called Mrs. Shirley Field Ridley, who was the Minister of Education at that time. And I sat there and there was a conversation, a telephone conversation between him, Mr. Harold Davis, and Shirley Field Ridley. When the conversation was finished, he hung up the phone. He said, "You will hear from us." and that was the end of that. Now I kept trying again to get employed, and eventually I got employed at GT&T, Guyana Telegram and Telegraph Company, Telegram and Telegraph Company. Again, I was told that they were glad that I made my application at that time because they were doing some expansion work in Berbice. And so he said, either you will be stationed in Berbice or down here, but at any rate, I'm going to send you the necessary letter of employment.
Council, could we pause, Council, because you've lost me. Not you, rather, the nature of the evidence. Are we now dealing with after he was dismissed from his first job?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I would wish to just ask some specific questions of Mr. Gilbert
Yes,
to
I
get
think
him back on track.
Yes, please.
Yes. Now,
Yes, I'm coming to that question, how I know. That is why I was going in that direction, so I could get to the point of how I knew that the letter came from the president. So I don't know. You go ahead.
yes, if you're
Yeah,
getting
let
to
them proceed.
that point, Mr. Gilbert, we will not interrupt you. So could you please continue?
All
And
right.
I would ask any specific questions after you're finished.
Yes. Well, the job there was guaranteed for me to start the first of the next month. But
Now,
in-
which job are you talking about?
This is GT&T, not GT&T, presently GT&T. That time it was GT, Guyana Telegraph and Telegram.
Guyana Telegraph and Telegraph
Yes.
Company.
Between that time, for me to now go and begin to work, there was a friend of mine who worked there and knew the difficulty I was having of getting a job. And so one day when she was passing the personnel office, she said to the personnel officer, "I'm very glad that you employ my friend here." And he said, who is that? He said, "Mr. Gilbert." He said, "Wait, hold, come a minute, come into my office, have a seat, sit down." He said, "How long you know this, Mr. Gilbert?" I said, "I know him since he came back." He said, the officer said, "He looks so much like a preacher." And they had a little conversation, and he said to her, he said, "Here, when we give him the employment here, we did not know that we had a letter here that he should not be employed. But rather than having him come to face that reality, tell him, don't bother to come." Now, he also told him that the letter he had there came from the president's office.
And that is how you received that information.
Yes.
Now,
The
could
name-
you, at this time, Mr. Gilbert, let's just back up a bit.
Yes.
You first indicated that you got a job with the Ministry of Economic Development.
Right. That was
Could
the
you,
first.
the first job,
Mhm.
could you indicate around what time period that was that you got that job?
That was in, I don't remember the month, but it was in early 1970.
In early 1970.
Yes, early 1970.
And after you got that job, approximately how long did you work at that ministry?
Just about 2 to 3 weeks. It was, I don't remember the time exactly, but it was before the month was completed.
Now, after you received that first letter from your job at the Ministry of Economic Development,
Dismissal, yes.
did anything happen immediately after you received that letter?
Well, I was trying all I knew to find out why is it I was dismissed. But no one was willing to tell me why I was dismissed. And days went by, weeks went by, but I was still trying, and I happened to get, because they weren't even allowing me to see the permanent secretary, because I would go and ask the secretary, the secretary to the permanent secretary, may I have an interview with the permanent secretary? He's not there. Another time, oh, he is gone out. But there came a time when I did get to see him, and he told me that you are a security risk.
Now, who would have told you that you were a security risk? Do you remember the name of that person?
No, I don't remember the name of the permanent secretary, because I wasn't there for that long time to get familiar with them.
And what was the rank of the person? What was the occupation or designation of that person?
He was the permanent secretary.
Of which ministry again?
Ministry of Economic Development.
And it was a female or a male?
It was a male.
A male. And this male's words to you were that?
You are a security risk.
Now, after you were told that you were a security risk by the permanent secretary,
Yeah.
did anything else happen in relation
Well,
to your job at the Ministry of Economic Development?
The suffering for me was so much that I did not lay back. I tried every effort to make an appointment with the president, Mr. Eliphaz Burnham. It took some time, but one of the times when I went to the office there, I met this gentleman who was working with the president.
Is it Oscar Clark?
Yes, Mr. Clark. Mr. Clark was working. He is now an official in the APNU presently, but he was the person. And he said to the secretary, who was a female, "We don't have time with these people. Don't worry with these people. Don't bother with them." Told that is secretary. But I would still persist and go to try to make the appointment. And eventually, I got an appointment with Mr. Burnham. Took a little while, but then I did succeed. And Mr. Burnham asked me 2 questions. And
What were
The
those 2
first
questions,
question-
Mr. Gilbert?
pardon me?
What were those 2 questions?
Yes, I'm trying to remember them now. One was, what is your politics, comrade? What is your politics, comrade? And I told him that my politics is anything that would result in the upliftment of the people in my country. And he looked at me in pity, looked at me in anger. I couldn't fully understand the changes in his face as he looked at me. And then he asked the next question. He said, why didn't you put your article in the New Nation? Now the New Nation was the PNC newspaper. Why didn't you put your article there? So I said to him, it's who asked me to do the writing that I wrote for. And the article there was hands to
Permission to just refresh the witness from the name of the article as is in his written statement. Grateful, please. Mr. Gilbert, if you look on the bottom of the first page, the title there is Unselfish Hands to Mold the Nation.
Unselfish Hand to Mold the Nation. That was the article. Why I didn't write for the New Nation? And I told him that it is who asked me to do some writing I wrote for, and that was the PPP newspaper, the Mirror, in which that article appeared.
Now,
And
Mr.
yes.
Gilbert, could you share with the members of the commission perhaps a brief summary of what your article entailed?
What my article? My article entailed certain things like the condition that I observed in Guyana when I came back. I think I had included some of my experience with Dr. Martin Luther King, because when I was in the States, I was part of that Selma to Montgomery march that is so historic these days. I think I mentioned that, and I think I also mentioned that for an independent nation, we should try to build an environment where we can keep our young people at home. I think that those are some of the things I mentioned in the article. I'm not very sure, because it's 37 so many years now. They didn't even reflect on that, so I cannot give you specific words that were in that article.
Yes, Mr. Gilbert. In relation to this article, you said you wrote about the atmosphere?
About what?
The atmosphere at the time?
Yes, the conditions I observed in Guyana, the fearful, people had become very fearful. It was not the Guyana I had left. And I was very, very concerned about that. Why people are fearful of the government. And sometimes I would make statements, I said, boy, shut up, don't say that. I said, why I shouldn't say what I'm saying? But there was fear in the country. But
Reverend Gilbert, just for clarification, you told us that you were told that you were a security risk,
Yes.
and you wrote this article. Were you actively involved in any politics at the time?
No. It is later on when I get to know.
Okay, I just wanted to know.
Now, Mr. Gilbert, after you had this conversation with the then president,
Yeah.
Prime Minister actually, what happened after you answered that second question?
He told me, you will hear from me. I'm going to Madhya today, but you will hear from me. Never did. Never did.
After you would have had that meeting, Mr. Gilbert, could you tell the members of the commission where was your next spot that you tried to seek employment?
I wrote letters. That one I can't remember. Can't remember where else I tried. Oh, yes, I do remember. After time was going and I was getting more and more frustrated, I decided that I would go and see the opposition leader. The opposition leader was Dr. Chetty Jagan at the time. And I went to him.
And could you share with the members of the commission what, if anything, happened after you went to the leader of the opposition at the time?
I explained to him what I was going through, and I told him that I am a security risk according to what I have been informed. That is why I lost my job. And of course, this letter that the gentleman said at GTT, he had also said that this letter here, we did not have it. We did not know it was here. That is what he said. We did not know it was here. Later on, we found out that letter was there. And I explained all of that to the leader of the opposition. she had the children. And he thought a little while, and then he picked up the phone. And then he made about 3 or 4 different tries. I don't know who he was speaking to, but he several times he spoke to people. And then after some time, he said to me, I have just spoken to Mr. Agard, who is the Chief Education Officer in the Ministry of Education. You go there now. And I did, and I found Mr. Agard was a very nice man and spoke with me. He said, all right, you will go to Covent Garden Secondary School and you will teach there. And that is when I got the first job and I came back.
Could you indicate to the members of the commission around what year that was that you got the appointment to teach at Covent Garden Secondary?
It was in April 1971.
And after your appointment there, how long did you remain working with the Ministry of Education?
I taught there, and then I was transferred to Charlestown Government Secondary, taught there. And then in 1977, I was seconded to the Curriculum Development Unit, stationed in Queen's College compound. And I worked there at the curriculum development until 1979. And in that year, I got a letter which did not send me back to Charleston Government Secondary, but to a school, maybe, I don't know, but it is near to the Venezuelan border. I don't know the name of the school, but that's what the letter said. And I could not go there. I had my wife and 2 children there. I couldn't go in the interior there. So what I did, I decided that, let me see, what I did. I used my vehicle, and I did hire car work with it.
I'm losing him.
Mr. Gilbert, when you were given the appointment to go near the Venezuelan border, did you accept that appointment?
No, I didn't accept it.
And what was your reason for not accepting?
There were 2 reasons. One was my family, and the second was that I had written previously to Howard University. Sorry. I had written to Howard University. I had gotten acceptance on a fellowship, not a scholarship. I got a fellowship letter for me to attend Howard University for my master's, and then, of course, doctorate follows whenever you get a fellowship. That is how the process goes. I went to Mr. Lowe, the Chief Education Officer, M.T. Lowe, and I told him that I would like to have the foreigners for time being to take up the appointment. And he said he's not giving me any relief, any document so that I can go. And it is at that point I decide to use my car and do hire work as a driver.
And when you use your car for hire, you would have been earning money that way?
Yes.
And other than your car for hire, did you have any other source of income?
No other source.
Mr. Gilbert, do you know anybody by the name of Walter Rodney?
Yes. Walter
you-
became my friend at one point.
Could you now explain to the members of the commission how it is you came to know Walter Rodney?
It is a little hazy in my mind as to the first time I met him. I wasn't quite sure about the first time, but I remember very clearly that in 1978 I was walking on Camp Street, and Walter had a small, very small car. You don't see them on the road anymore. And he stopped his car and he came over to me and we started to talk. He had gotten an appointment as a professor at the University of Guyana, but he wasn't able to take up the job there. So we talked a little while, and then he pulled out the paper and he said, Reuben, take this. The day might come when you will need it. And when I looked at it, it was his curriculum vitae he gave to me. The situation in Guyana was so fearful that you could not move around freely and speak freely, so our contact would be during the night. And I remember the very last time, before that last one, I went down to where they had occupied their office in Tiger Bay. Is it Tiger Bay? Yes, had his office. And I was to the front of the building, and he was behind. Walter Rodney was behind. And 3 men came, and they asked if Walter Rodney is here. I said, yes, he's behind me. So I went back to the back of the building, and I told Walter Rodney that 3 men there to see me. He came out, and then he took the 3 men behind, and he went with them. I don't know what their conversation was. But it was later on which that I was able to identify from the photograph. Gregory Smith was one of those persons. I didn't know his name, I didn't know who they were. But later on, after he was killed, then I realized that this was one of the fellows that asked and went back and spoke with him. But the last time now that he came to my house, there was something peculiar about him and the anxiety he had, and it was concerning the survival of his children and his wife. I sensed that in him that he was very, very extremely concerned about his wife and children. That was the last time before, three days before he was assassinated. I had this feeling, I don't know, it is not something that you can explain. And a lot of people don't believe that there are spiritual forces in the world, so you can't convince them about certain things. But I had this intuition, and I had this terrible, uncomfortable feeling. And that feeling was to go and tell Walter that he will be killed. The first thing after that thought came to me, I said to myself, I am going to go and tell this man that he's going to be killed. The man is going to think that we're planning something. I'm not going. But the longer I took, before I went to him, it's the more I was having this internal force telling me to go and tell him. Eventually I gave in. And I went, and the strange thing about it, I did not know where his office was at that time. But I ended up right where he was. And I was hoping that nobody will come but himself, and it happened. He came to the door. After I rapped, he came to the door. And he said, "Reuben, come in." I said, "No, I'm not coming in." I said, "I do want to tell you, you are going to be killed." He watched at me, and then he dropped his head. And then when he raised his head and looked at me again, he said, "You know of any situation?" I said, "No, I don't know of any situation that you be killed." And then he studied a little while, and then he said, "If you know about it, would you tell me?" And I said, "I don't know if I'll tell you." And I worked, and I walked away. And 3 days after then, he was killed.
Reverend Gilbert, from the time you interacted with Walter Rodney,
Yes.
were you ever a supporter of the Working People's Alliance Party?
I was a supporter, but not a member.
You were a supporter.
And that support came through my closeness to Walter.
As a supporter at the time, did you attend any public meetings?
Yes, I attended several public meetings.
And when you attended these meetings, did you ever observe meetings being disturbed or disrupted?
Yes, several. But one of them stuck out in my mind, and that is at the border green. Thousands of people were there. And the police tried to stop the meeting, tried to break up the meeting, and they were unsuccessful. And then they used tear gas. And Walter climbed up on the top of a car, and he told the people, he said, "Get down, all of you get down," and the whole set of people just get down flat on the grass. Instead of going away, they lied on the grass there until the tear gas subsided. I remember that one. Other meetings I recall where, while the meeting, just as meeting started, House of Israel people will come, also YSM is the PNC youth arm. They would come, and they would often try to start a feud, try to get some kind of confusion. So they will come, and sometimes they will come and stand right in front of you and start talking in your face. And then another one will come up, and he would ask, "What is the situation, hey man? What is the situation?" And eventually a big argument would start, and the pushing, and then a whole set will come where the meeting is, and then start, and then there would be a beating out.
When you say there would be a beating out, could you explain a bit more as to what you mean by a beating out?
They would have sticks, and they would start beating people.
Who would have these sticks?
These people, YSM people and House of Israel.
And who were they beating with the sticks?
They're beating people who were at the meeting listening to Walter Rodney.
Now, how do you know they were House of Israel?
Well, sometimes you identify them by their dress, but sometimes you identify them by their faces. Their dress was black and green and red.
Now, the ones you would have identified by their faces, can you now remember the names?
No, not at all. In fact, I didn't even know their names at that time, let alone 37 years later.
You referred to members of the YSM.
Yes.
How were you able to identify members from the YSM?
Well, my brother belonged to the party, the PNC party, and he would say to me, as one of the persons from the YSM, or that those people here people belong to YSM. But you know them from their actions and their behavior and their hatred for people who associated themselves with Walter Rodney.
You referred to your brother.
Mr. Commissioner, we're going to filter that too?
Pardon?
We're going to filter that evidence too?
If you have to,
No, are we going to filter that kind of evidence as good? Not evidence, what is happening in the box. You know them by their actions and
well, you will have the opportunity to question the witness. So just make a note of anything that you wish to have clarified by him or you wish to press him on, and you will have your full opportunity.
Mr. Gilbert, you mentioned your brother was a member
Yeah.
of the PNC.
Yes.
YSM? Or
Oh,
just
not-
the PNC?
The PNC. I don't know if he was. I don't know, and I don't think I could recall that he was in the YSM, but I know he was a member of the PNC.
And what is your brother's name?
Neville Gilbert.
You indicated a few moments earlier that you could identify people from the YSM by their actions and in particular their hatred for
Yes.
those who associated with Walter Rodney. Do you at this time wish to offer to the members of the commission and the listening public an explanation as to what you mean by their actions and their hatred?
Well, they will meet you on the road, and they will call you names, and they will throw
What
out,
kinds of names?
tell you what are some of the things they say. You can't recall some of the names they will call you. But there's aspersions they will throw at you from time to time when they see you. I remember one time they say you crab dog. Sometimes they would say I don't recall some of the.
Okay, Mr. Gilbert, what other actions other than the name calling did you attribute to identifying particular persons as being members of YSM?
Sometimes in the country at that time, you had groups, different groups. Apart from the military, you had paramilitary organization. And sometimes they would stake out your home. I remember one time there was always a person late at night would stay by a house. The situation is house, you couldn't see the person. But if you come out the door and look down the step, you can see the person. And they would keep surveillance about your actions. Sometimes you have literature in terms of meetings. You get literature would be dispersed, and they will come and tug the literature out of your hand and tear them up right there. But some of them were identified through my brother. My brother tell me who they are.
Thank you for the information, Mr. Gilbert. We will now move on.
Yeah.
Are you aware that at some point in time, Walter Rodney and others were charged with setting fire to a government building?
Yes, I recall that very clearly.
Could you share with the members of the Commission how you became aware of that and what, if any, other knowledge you have about that particular time when those charges were instituted?
Well, the building was burned. The information was in the newspapers. And many of the statements that were made by the Prime Minister, something to the effect, let them make their wills, and the least, maybe not verbatim, I can't remember it verbatimly, but I remember he would say, it's the lion and the gladiator, and from time to time you would hear him say, I offer them no less a better death than Judas Iscariot. These things years ago I had written them down, but I lost all of them in Grenada when the island was invaded by the United States. Only got out there with all what I had on. So I lost a lot of information that I had.
I understand, Mr. Gilbert. The charge that was instituted against Walter Rodney and others,
Yes.
where were those charges being heard?
In the magistrate's court
Where? Which magistrate's court?
in Georgetown.
Were you ever present at any court hearing for those particular matters?
Yes, I went with the crowd that gathered, but not in the building.
And could you tell the members of the commission what, if anything, would have happened when you went with the crowd that was gathered?
The riot squad, one of those times, were called out. And
The what squad? I don't mean to interrupt
The
you, Mr. Gilbert, but
the riot squad,
okay,
riot
continue,
squad,
please.
they came out. Among them too were some of the YSM people and some of the Rabbi Washington people, the names I mentioned just now. They were there. And one in the crowd, one of the YSM person grabbed me, and another took his baton and rammed my ribs and broke two of the bones in my ribs. And then they handed me over to the police, which had on the police uniform, and he dragged me over to Avenue of the Republic because that took place in Crowell Street. And he dragged me over and carried me to a bus in Avenue of the Republic where the bus was parked. When I got there, the pain was so intense that I told someone, well, he pushed me, the policeman pushed me into the bus. And I told someone, I said, now take off this shirt and bind around my wrist. And this young fellow was very glad that he was able to help me, and he took off my shirt and bound me around my rib cage here in the bus. The bus subsequently was driven up to Mako Arcade here, which is about, I would say, 3 to 4 miles. I wouldn't bet on that. I'm just making a suggestion. But it's far out of the town, and then far from Georgetown. And then when you get from the public road, you have to drive in another mile or so, 2 miles, to get to Mako Arcade here. And when they came there, the police got everybody out of the bus, and I couldn't get out of the bus. And one of the policemen attempted to drag me out, and a young lady, she rushed to him and pushed him. And that thing always remained in my mind. that, I mean, a woman is so fearless, but she and other persons came and gingerly took me out to the bus and put me on the grass outside. Among the people in the bus who were captured and carried up there was Father Malcolm Rodriguez. Father Malcolm Rodriguez, such a nice man. He took me, because at that time, no high car could take you in, because the situation, if they take any of these people who are with Walter Rodney and them, they call us names. What do they call us now?
Names. If they took you in, what
Any-
happened, Mr. Gilbert? It didn't come out clear.
Yes.
If they took you in, what would happen?
Father Malcolm Rodriguez took me in a car and carried me to the St. Joseph Mercy Hospital. And there we remained for about a week till the bones started to knit back, and I wasn't feeling so much pain anymore.
Now, you said your bones had to knit back. Could you describe for the members of the commission, when you arrived at the hospital with the assistance of Father Malcolm Rodriguez, what kind of injuries you had on your person at that time?
Yes. Well, those were the only, that was the only injury, the breaking of two of my ribs, which was seen through the X-ray.
Can you recall if it was your left side or right side?
It was my right side.
Could you indicate to the members of the commission approximately what year this was that this particular incident occurred?
It was 1979, but I don't recall the month.
1979. Reverend Gilbert, do you recall sometime during the year of 1980 when you were on your way home?
Yes. I was driving my car home, and a neighbor, they call him Jimmy, but his name is James Daniels. He rushed out. I'm coming this way, east to west, and his house is, I have to pass his house, and he ran out to the gate. And he flagged me down very, very anxiously, or agitatively, flagged me down. So when I stopped, he said, "Here, you got a guitar case in your house?" So I was taken back. Well, why he's asking me if I have a guitar, it's great. But he said, "Here, man, here we're telling you. I want to get the exact words, please, that Jimmy told me."
That would be the third page of your written statement, Reverend Gilbert.
Yes, his exact word, "They are going to come to kill you tonight." And the "they" meaning the YSM hitmen of the PNC. Because he, James, was a member of the PNC party, and he told me, he said, "Look, what they're going to do, they're going to say that you had when they kill you, they're going to say that you had a gun there in that guitar case." But how this guitar case came about, I had hired a lady to clean the place and look over my two boys during the daytime, and that was the only person that knew that I had a guitar case there. Right? So he told me they're going to come and kill you tonight, and they're going to say you had a gun in that guitar case. By the time I drove in, I parked the car. I said to myself, what must I do here? And I called my brother, my same brother that is a member of the PNC.
Could you state your brother's name now?